I didn't wake up screaming that time. I woke up falling. My legs seized up tight, hard as iron knots, right between 2 and 3 in the morning. That's when it always happened. No warning, just fire in my calves, and the muscles pulling so hard I couldn't breathe. My 82-year-old body hit the hardwood floor like a sack of rocks. I lay there on the cold wood, choking on the pain until the sun started to rise, painting weak gray light through the lace curtains. My dignity, that's what hurt the most. For 60 years I sat at that old Singer machine. My hands still remember the feeling of linen, of heavy canvas, of slippery silk. I stitched life into fabric. Uniforms during the war, silly taffeta prom dresses, a dozen fancy wedding gowns. I learned strength by holding a needle right, never letting the thread knot up. I learned patience by fixing other people's mistakes. My whole life was simple. Thrift, hard work, and my son, David. Now this pain came every night, dragging me out of my bed, tearing my strength right out of me. It made me feel like something disposable, like old scrap fabric. I went to the doctors, the good ones and the cheap ones. 9 different offices, 9 different waiting rooms. My Medicare card was almost clear through the middle. I used it so much. I told them about the midnight screams. I told them about the dizzy spells and the frantic fluttering in my chest. They never looked at my hands. They looked at my date of birth. "Margaret," they'd say, nice and slow. Like I was slow. "You're 82, dear. This is just what happens. That's the way the cookie crumbles." They gave me fancy pamphlets about posture and told me to eat more bananas. Bananas! I was drowning in bananas. Nothing worked. The episodes got worse. Sometimes the weakness stayed with me all day, a heavy sinking feeling. I started thinking maybe they're right. Maybe I am just falling apart. Maybe I'm going to die right here, alone in the dark, choking on my own pain. That was my greatest fear, dying helpless, having lost all my strength in front of the people who were supposed to care. David and Sarah, they live about 20 minutes away. They started visiting more often when the falling started. David seemed worried, but it wasn't the worry of a son. It was the tight, nervous look of a man who knows he has to deal with a mess. Sarah, though. Sarah didn't look at me at all. She looked at the house. My house. The one I sacrificed for. The mortgage paid off 20 years ago, with wedding dress money. Sarah's eyes traced the molding and the old oak floors like she was mapping territory. Like a predator looking for the soft spots. "We just want to help, Mom," Sarah cooed one evening. She decided she was taking control of my vitamins and supplements. "It's too much for you to manage. David and I will make sure you get exactly what you need, every night." She kept my pill boxes locked up in her fancy travel kit. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt that dependence settle over me, thick and suffocating. And then, the awful thing happened. The cramps always seemed to get worse, exactly after Sarah started managing my routine. When I took my old plain pills in the morning, I felt okay. But after her nightly routine, the agony came back, aggressive and hungry. It couldn't be. Sarah was family. She was trying to help. David wouldn't let her do anything bad. Money doesn't grow on trees. I taught David that. I taught him the value of honesty. But the injustice felt deep, like a splinter under the skin. I felt like a burden. I knew, deep down where the good instincts live, that Sarah didn't see me as Margaret, his mother. She saw me as the slow-moving occupant of a desirable property. One rainy Tuesday night, I felt especially weak. The palpitations were back, that frantic flutter in my chest that felt like my heart was trying to escape my body. Sarah insisted I take a small, chalky white pill with my water. Extra calcium, she called it, giving me that tight, non-smile. Within an hour, the dull ache in my legs was back, then the fiery knots. It felt worse than ever. I was thrashing in bed, crying hard. My head was spinning with dizziness. I was praying for relief, praying I wouldn't fall out of bed and break something this time. Then, I heard them. Hushed voices coming from the kitchen just below my room. David and Sarah. They thought I was asleep, or too far gone in the pain to listen. I stopped thrashing and pressed my ear to the floorboards. "She's getting worse, David. Did you see how weak she was today?" Sarah's voice was sharp, impatient, utterly devoid of the syrup I heard earlier. David sounded nervous, almost frightened. "It's happening too fast, Sarah. What if someone notices the change?" "Don't be ridiculous," Sarah hissed. 9 doctors already signed off. It's her age. Just keep replacing the supply the way I showed you. We need to make sure the process is complete before the appraisal next month." I froze. My blood turned to ice, but my mind was suddenly very, very clear. Process? Supply? Appraisal? The pain wasn't just age. My paranoia wasn't madness. David didn't just want me out of the way. He and Sarah were making me weak. They were doing this to me, deliberately. I didn't know how, or why they would use the word supply, or what kind of awful process they were talking about for the appraisal. But that tiny white pill Sarah insisted on, the pain that followed, the secret meetings, and that cold word, process, it all snapped into a terrifying picture. I had raised David. I had loved him unconditionally. And now, he was letting his wife, maybe helping her, wait for me to stop breathing so they could steal this house. The injustice was like a physical weight on my chest, heavier than the agony in my legs. I didn't cry then. I was too furious to cry. I was old, yes. I was weak, yes. But the strength that stitched thousands of seams over 60 years was not gone. It was just focused now. I had a bad feeling about this. Not just a feeling, but a cold, hard fact. All I knew for sure was that the crippling pain that had me falling out of bed wasn't natural. It was being caused. And the source of the agony was living right under my roof, waiting for me to die. The agony seized my legs again, harder this time, demanding obedience. I gasped, gripping the sheets. And then I heard Sarah whisper the final, terrifying sentence. So clearly I thought she must be standing right next to the bed. "She won't last another week if we keep this up." I woke up the next morning feeling like my skin was made of fine glass. One wrong move and I would shatter. But the fear was gone. It had turned into something cold and hard in my chest. They were doing this. That wasn't the way the cookie crumbles. It was poison. I had to be careful. They were watching me now, waiting. If they thought I knew, they would speed things up. The first thing I had to do was check that pill. That night, Sarah came in with her nice smile and her small glass of water. "Extra support, Mom," she said, holding the chalky white thing out. I made a big show of taking a sip of water, but instead of swallowing, I tucked the pill right under my tongue, pressing it into a piece of old chewing gum I kept there. It was clumsy, but Sarah didn't look at my face. She looked past me, at the wall. The night was torture. I had to fake the spasms. My legs still hurt from the previous night, but the truly sharp, seizing pain didn't come. I thrashed and cried out, and David rushed in, nervous and pale. Sarah stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching me suffer with a tight, calculating calm. "See, David? It's getting worse," she murmured, loud enough for me to hear. "We need to get those forms signed this week." I lay there thinking about the life I'd given David. 60 years of stitching strength into fabric, and now my strength was being stolen by my own child. The anger was a slow, steady burn. When they finally went back to bed, thinking I was asleep, I took the pill out. It was bitter, powdery, and tasted nothing like my usual vitamins. I put it carefully into a small, clean envelope and hid it deep inside my seamstress kit, among the bobbins of white thread. It was proof. I knew it. But proof of what exactly? And how to fight back when you're 82 and they control everything? I spent the next 2 days watching them. Sarah was always smiling, but her eyes were cold, like a winter lake. David was jumpy. He kept asking me if I wanted more banana. He knew the cramps were worse after his wife's nightly help. David kept checking his phone in secret, looking at the time. They were in a rush, just like Sarah said. They needed the process complete before the appraisal. I realized I couldn't trust anyone inside these walls. I needed help from the outside, but I couldn't use the phone. Sarah monitored the house phone, and David had bought me one of those confusing new cell phones that I never learned how to use. My only hope was Mrs. Perkins. She lived right next door, a sweet woman, retired physical therapist, who knew more about bones and muscles than all the young doctors I'd seen combined. She was always tending to her prize-winning hydrangeas that grew right up to the fence line. The chance came late Wednesday afternoon. I made sure David and Sarah were downstairs arguing over a bill. I grabbed my gardening gloves, old habits die hard, and shuffled outside, pretending to be utterly defeated. "Margaret, dear, you shouldn't be out here," Mrs. Perkins called over the fence, immediately concerned by my slow movement. I leaned low, pretending to smell a rose that wasn't there. My voice was just a whisper. "Edith, I need your help. I think David and Sarah, they are doing something to me." I told her everything. The midnight cramps, the dizziness, the frantic fluttering in my chest. Then I showed her the small, bitter white pill from the envelope. She took it in her hand, crushed it gently between her fingernails, and sniffed it. Her face went from kind concern to utter horror. "Oh, Margaret, dear Lord, this isn't calcium," she whispered. "This is a diuretic, a powerful one, and a cheap one at that. They're making you take it every night, aren't they?" I nodded, feeling a dizzy spell just hearing the word. Edith explained it simply. "A diuretic makes you lose water. But you don't just lose water. You lose all your essential salts, Margaret. Your electrolytes. Magnesium, potassium, the very things your muscles need to work. They're draining you dry." It all snapped into place. The cramps, the falling, the weakness that made me feel like old scrap fabric. It was the missing magnesium. And the fluttering in my chest? That was the potassium, or lack of it, making my 82-year-old heart skip beats. "The doctor told me to eat bananas," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "David keeps giving me extra bananas." Edith looked grim. "Bananas are full of potassium, but if they're giving you this diuretic every night, that potassium is being flushed out just as fast as you take it in. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with the plug open. You were getting worse, Margaret, because they were compounding the problem." The betrayal hit me harder than any physical cramp. David wasn't just neglecting me. He was watching me suffer from a condition he and his wife were actively creating. They manufactured the symptoms of old age collapse. They needed me weak and confused to sign over the house. Edith saw the pain in my eyes. "This is criminal, Margaret. They are trying to get the doctor's reports to say you're incompetent so they can take everything." "You live and learn," I murmured, staring at the white powder on her fingertips. I was learning the worst lesson of my life. "We need to fight this, Margaret," Edith said, looking around nervously. "You need your strength back quickly, and they must not suspect a thing. I can help you, but you must be vigilant." She handed me a small folded pamphlet, tucked into the rose bush like a secret message. "We are going to fight the depletion. You need serious hydration and magnesium-rich foods. But to fight the immediate cramps, the pain they rely on to keep you terrified, we use movement and breathing." She quickly explained the technique, her voice low and urgent. "The key to fighting those muscle spasms is breathing. When you feel the cramp starting, you must use the controlled 4-6 breathing technique for 2 minutes. You breathe in for 4 counts and out slowly for 6 counts. Focus only on that. It's been scientifically shown to reduce muscle tension by up to 18%. I listened, hanging on to every word. This wasn't some doctor's vague pamphlet. This was a weapon. "And after the breathing, you follow immediately with a 45-second calf stretch on each leg. Hold it tight, Margaret. Done correctly, it reduces recurring episodes by 30 to 40% the very same night." She looked at me, her eyes firm. "You must do this in secret. They need to see you weak. But you, Margaret, you get stronger." I hugged her quickly, fiercely. "Thank you, Edith. I will not break." I started my secret regimen immediately. The next night, when Sarah gave me the pill, which I again pretended to swallow, I was ready. When the dull ache started, I didn't scream or thrash. I lay still, concentrating. In 1, 2, 3, 4. Out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I repeated the cycle for 2 full minutes. The fiery grip on my calf muscle loosened just a little. It was still there, like a tightrope, but it wasn't the searing, paralyzing agony that usually had me falling out of bed. I felt 18% better. I could actually move. Then I eased my legs straight and performed the 45-second stretch, leaning my foot against the headboard, pulling my toes back. It hurt, truly hurt, but it was a different pain. The kind of pain you feel when a tight knot is finally undone. I held it for the full 45 seconds on the right leg, then the left. The cramps never escalated to the point of screaming. I lay there, feeling the lingering ache, but I was in control. I had defeated their weapon. I knew then. I would not just survive this. I would beat them. But surviving wasn't enough. I needed proof of their greed. The worst part of this whole process, as Sarah called it, was realizing the depth of David's involvement. It was one thing for Sarah to be greedy. But David, my David. A few days later, Sarah and David went out to the lawyer's office, promising to be back in an hour. This was my chance. I forced my tired legs into action. I had a bad feeling about this, a cold dread in my stomach that told me the financial reason was bigger than just the house. I knew they kept important papers in David's small old desk in the study. I searched frantically, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing in the drawers, nothing in the files. Then I remembered David always said his father taught him to hide money under the carpet. I tugged at the edge of the cheap rug under the desk chair. Sure enough, tucked beneath the carpet pad was a thin manila folder. I opened it, and the contents hit me like a physical punch. The house appraisal document was there, marked for final transfer valuation. $450,000. Okay, I knew that. But then there was the second document, an accelerated life insurance policy. $200,000, payable instantly upon terminal diagnosis or incapacitation. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively trying to get me declared incapable, or worse, speed up the end. The total payoff was $650,000. My life was worth that much to my only son. The tears finally came, not of fear, but of profound, agonizing loss. It was an overwhelming pain, heavier than all the cramps combined. I wanted to scream at the injustice. I wanted the old strength back, the Margaret who stitched thousands of seams over 60 years, the one who taught David that honesty was priceless. Then at the bottom of the folder I found the printout of a text message thread. David, it's hard watching her suffer. Sarah, we're almost there. That $650,000 pays off all our debt. Just keep replacing the supply. We need the appraisal next week. He knew. He wasn't just weak. He was complicit. The son I raised was gone. I didn't weep long. I stood up slowly, feeling every year of my age. But my mind was ice cold. Over my dead body, I thought, gripping the papers so tightly, my knuckles turned white. I would not let them win. I would not die confused and disposable. I couldn't just call the police. They would deny everything, and the doctors had already labeled me old and confused. I needed absolute proof, and I needed to be demonstrably healthy when the moment came. Sarah and David, seeing my continued feigned weakness, I still dropped small things and pretended to be confused about the time. Grew confident. They were getting careless. "The clock is ticking, Mom," Sarah said one evening, pushing a pen and 2 official forms toward me. "We need to sign these powers of attorney and the do not resuscitate DNR forms. It's just prudent. For when the next fall happens," I pretended to squint at the paper. "Oh dear, my eyesight is so bad. I can't sign anything until I have copies of my current medical bills. I need to make sure the costs are accurate for your tax deductions, dear. Get me access to the hospital's patient portal, and then I'll sign." Sarah, eager to get the DNR signed, didn't hesitate. She wrote down the hospital login and password on a sticky note. She had just handed me the key to their entire plan. The next day, while Sarah was busy downstairs, I called Edith. She came over under the guise of bringing me a casserole. Edith was thrilled when I showed her the login. "Margaret, you are sharp as a tack," she said, carefully logging in on her own tablet, which she never left exposed in my house. Edith found everything. My real lab results from before Sarah took over, electrolytes all normal. And then, the new results, showing severe depletion, consistent with diuretic use. She printed off every document. I had my proof of their method, my proof of their motive, and now, my proof of the physical damage they were causing. I also started recording them. I found my tiny voice recorder, the one David used to use for school interviews, and hid it deep inside my pincushion, next to my old thimbles. I left it running day and night. Meanwhile, I used Edith's health techniques religiously. I learned to distinguish between the artificial pain caused by the lack of magnesium and the normal aches of being 82. I cut back on the 3 bananas David insisted on every day. I started drinking gallons of water and took the magnesium supplements Edith bought for me from a store far away. The difference was astonishing. Before, my episodes felt uncontrollable, terrifying. Now, when the tightness started, I controlled it with the breathing. I would quickly perform the 4-6 breathing for 2 minutes. In for 4, out for 6. The tension would melt away by that 18% Edith promised. I even started doing simple calf raises on the stairs. I was slow, but I was moving. My palpitations lessened. I felt the strength returning, not the strength of a young woman, but the deep, sturdy strength of someone who knows how to fix things. David and Sarah, however, saw only what they wanted to see. I maintained my facade of confusion and feigned weakness perfectly. I shuffled. I sighed. I let David help me up the stairs, even though I could now do it myself. They grew cocky. "Mom, you need to be realistic," David announced one evening, his voice booming with forced authority. "The notary is ready. The bank is ready to execute the title transfer. We moved the signing date up. It's happening tomorrow morning. You sign the house over, Mom. It's for the best." My blood ran cold. Tomorrow? They were speeding it up. "Whatever you say, David," I whispered meekly, keeping my eyes downcast. I went up to my room. My legs didn't seize up that night. I was too focused. I took the voice recorder out of the pincushion and began dictating the full timeline of the betrayal, reading aloud the financial documents and the dates of the prescribed pills. I spoke clearly, firmly, readying the final devastating piece of evidence. I finished speaking into the recorder, placing it back in the pincushion. I was ready. I had my strength back, my evidence, and my resolve. David and Sarah thought they were getting a signing. They were getting a reckoning. But as I finished, I heard the front door slam. They were home early. I hadn't expected them back so soon. "Mom!" David called out, his voice giddy and loud, laced with relief and premature celebration. I heard glass clinking downstairs. "The notary just confirmed. She'll be here tomorrow morning. It's done." I stood in the dark room, facing the window. I had only 12 hours left to execute my final, devastating plan before I signed away everything, including my life. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel. Thursday morning arrived heavy with false solemnity. David and Sarah were impeccable, exchanging nervous glances filled with anticipation as they waited for the notary. The smell of expensive cookies and tea hung in the living room, a fragile disguise for greed. I dragged myself into the room as if every step were agony, leaning heavily on the cane I had unearthed from the closet. David watched me with impatience, Sarah with that fake, calculating smile. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sarah, beaming, opened the door for the notary public, Mrs. Davies. But when the notary entered, she was not alone. Behind her entered 3 people David and Sarah had not invited. Detective Inspector Thompson, grave-faced, Mr. Robert Jenkins, my actual attorney, and Edith Perkins, my neighbor and friend, holding a clipboard. David and Sarah's smiles melted into icy dread. "Mom, what does this mean?" David stammered, his face draining of color. I did not answer with words. Instead, I let go of the cane. It clattered loudly on the oak floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. I straightened my spine. I was steady. I was strong. For the first time in months, my 82 years felt like 60. The David I had raised took a step back. Sarah stared at me, her mask of calm finally broken. "This, David," I said, my voice clear and completely free of the tremor they expected, "is not a signing. This is a reckoning." I walked to the table, placing my hands on the power of attorney forms and the do not resuscitate form they wanted me to sign. You wanted to know why? You wanted to know the price of my life. I slid my small digital recorder across the mahogany table. It was black and discreet. I pressed play, and at full volume, David's voice filled the room, unmistakable, metallic, and clear. "It's hard watching her suffer." And then Sarah's cold, rushed whisper. "We're almost there. That $650,000 pays off all our debt. Just keep replacing the supply. We need the appraisal next week." Mrs. Davies, the notary, raised her hand to her mouth, shocked. Detective Thompson had already pulled out his notepad. I continued, opening the manila folder David had hidden under the study carpet. "First, the motive. I declared. The house, 247 Oak Street, valued at $450,000, and the accelerated life insurance policy, payable upon my incapacitation, worth $200,000. I touched the printed total. $650,000. That was the price you put on your own mother. Sarah tried to scream that the recording was illegal, but I cut her off with a look. Silence. You will hear me out. Now let's talk about the method. I pulled from my purse the small envelope containing the bitter powder from the white pill. This is the supply Sarah was replacing. It wasn't calcium, as she claimed, but a cheap, powerful diuretic. I nodded toward Edith. Edith, the retired physical therapist, stepped forward, resting the clipboard on the table. Regular nightly administration of this medication depleted Margaret's essential electrolytes, magnesium and potassium, which are crucial for muscle and cardiac function. It was a targeted attack. The report we obtained from the medical portal, through the login Sarah provided, Edith paused dramatically, confirms that Margaret's electrolyte levels dropped drastically after Sarah took control of the supplements. You manufactured the symptoms of a natural decline from old age, I finished. You trusted I would die of exhaustion or cardiac arrest caused by potassium depletion. You declared to the bank that I had blood pressure of 180 over 110, hoping I would suffer a stroke to finalize your fraud. I lifted my chin, looking David in the eyes. But thanks to my secret regimen, the controlled breathing of 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out, and the 45-second calf stretches, I fought against the pain you created. My blood pressure, verified by Edith this morning, is 120 over 80. I am not weak, David. I am recovered. David collapsed. He pushed the chair and lunged forward, stumbling over the fallen cane. Mom, I'm your only son, he begged, tears streaming down his face, though I saw no pain, only panic. We were drowning in debt. You're old, you were going to die anyway. You can't do this to me. Think of the family. I stared at him, my gaze empty of maternal affection. There was only the hardness of someone who recognized a predator in place of a son. I stitched thousands of wedding dresses over 60 years to buy this house honestly, stitch by stitch, I declared, my voice firm and icy. You planned my agonizing death with cheap poison to steal $650,000. You stopped being my son the day you calculated my death. I choose justice. Detective Thompson wasted no time. He stepped forward and pulled David's trembling arms behind his back. David and Sarah Mitchell, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud against an elderly person. You have the right to remain silent. The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs was the only sound heard as David and Sarah were escorted out of my house. The champagne they had brought to celebrate their premature victory left on the kitchen counter. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and merciless. The evidence was irrefutable. David Mitchell was sentenced to 12 years in a closed-regime prison for attempted qualified homicide and fraud against the elderly. His wife, Sarah, received 9 years for conspiracy and administering the substances. The court immediately revoked all of David's financial licenses. Both their careers were destroyed. The value they coveted was never reached. On the contrary, all their assets were confiscated to cover legal costs and a substantial payment of $120,000 in moral and material damages awarded to me. The Des Moines community, shocked upon learning the grotesque details of the diuretic plot, repudiated David and Sarah. Childhood friends crossed the street to avoid them. They were isolated absolutely, the same fate they had planned for me. Today, David serves his sentence at Iowa State Penitentiary in a closed regime. Sarah is in a minimum security unit in another state. Neither receives family visits. The son who sought to bury his mother to take the house was buried alive in a concrete cell, while I remain, unwavering, in the home he coveted. I am 84 years old now, 2 years after that day at the notary's office. My life is not just longer, it is infinitely richer. The fear is gone, replaced by deep and quiet resilience. I lost 17 pounds during the recovery process and maintained stable weight. My blood pressure, which they claimed was 180 over 110, remains stable at 118 over 74, without heavy medication. The techniques Edith taught me became my purpose. I did not open a formal foundation, but I founded the Oak Street Resilience Circle. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, my living room, which David planned to sell, is filled with older women and men. We share stories and, mainly, knowledge. I teach them the power of fighting pain with the mind, the 4-6 breathing regimen to manage tension, and the 45-second stretches. Our mission is not just physical health, it is dignity. We have already helped over 50 neighbors identify the subtle signs of family manipulation and abuse, and to stand up before it's too late. Edith Perkins is our chief advisor. The strength that stitched thousands of fabrics over 60 years is now focused on mending lives. I still think of the David I raised, but the morning has passed. He wanted me confused and weak, but the $650,000 crime only made me clearer and more determined. He failed to steal my life and, in doing so, gave me a new purpose. I sit on the porch now, watching the hydrangeas Edith planted bloom in vibrant blue. The silence is complete and peaceful. There is no more frantic fluttering in my chest, no more searing pain in my muscles. Just the slow, steady rhythm of my breathing. David planned my agony for over a year to obtain the inheritance. I reversed the damage and rebuilt my life in a few weeks. What was meant to kill me at 82 taught me to truly live at 84. The quietness of my victory is the most complete there is. The most silent revenge is one that doesn't even need sugar or salt. Just a basin of warm water, and the courage not to die in silence. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story, and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.